When you get to be my age, life has a way of slowing itself down without asking your permission. Mornings feel like they have softer edges, and even the sunlight seems to sit a little longer on the porch before moving on. If you are here listening, let me say thank you. It matters more than you might think. Some stories sit heavy in a man's chest, and telling them out loud makes carrying them a little easier. Feel free to tell me where you are listening from, and if what I share speaks to you, stay a while. I am just an old man with a few miles on him, trying to pass on what time has taught me. My name is Leonard Brooks. I am 58 years old, retired from driving city buses through corners of Baltimore. Most folks only see from a distance. My hands are thick from years of gripping a steering wheel for 8-hour shifts, and my knees pop every time I stand up like they are keeping their own weather report. I live in a quiet waterfront town called Harbor Glen, Maryland. It is the kind of place where the grocery clerk remembers how your wife used to bake lemon bread, where neighbors wave just because it feels wrong not to, and where time moves at the pace of the tide. I have been a widower for 7 years now. My wife, Camille, passed on a warm August morning when the sun rose brighter than usual, like it was trying to guide her somewhere gentle. She used to grow herbs in the small patch of soil behind our house. Rosemary, thyme, mint, basil, all of them lifted their scent into the air whenever she brushed her hand across them. After she left, I promised myself I would keep that little garden alive. I am no expert, but they still grow. Some lean too far toward the sun, and others sprout crooked, but they stand. Maybe that is how love works after loss. It does not stay perfect, but it stays. Most mornings, I walk down to the pier, waving at the same fishermen who gather there before dawn. They argue about bait and tell stories nobody believes, but the laughter is real enough to warm the whole dock. I buy a small cup of coffee from a stall that never seems to update its menu. The cup is always too thin, and the lid never fits right, but somehow it tastes better than anything I make at home. If there is one thing in this world I am most proud of, it is my son, David Brooks, 29 years old, living in Atlanta now, working as a cybersecurity analyst for a tech firm. David is the kind of man who says what he means, and means what he says. He calls me every Sunday at exactly 7, the way he promised his mother he always would. Even when he travels for work or gets buried in deadlines, that call still comes. You do not break promises in our family, not the important ones. When David told me he had met someone, my heart lifted. Her name was Alyssa Grant. Smart, confident, polished in a way that reminded me of people who walk into a room already knowing they belong there. She talked about investments and business strategy with the same excitement I once used when explaining old bus routes to new drivers. 2 different languages, same energy. David looked at her the way a man looks when he believes life has finally opened a door just for him. Their wedding was in Atlanta, in a sleek garden venue lined with hanging lights that glowed like captured stars. I wore a gray suit Camille helped me pick out years before she got sick. As I stood there watching David wait at the altar, I felt her with me. I could almost hear her whisper, "We did good, Len. We really did." When Alyssa walked down the aisle, David's eyes filled with tears he tried and failed to hide. A father knows his son's heart, and mine felt full enough to lift me off the ground. The reception was full of music, bright laughter, clinking glasses, and the warmth of 2 families trying to blend into one. For a moment, standing near the edge of the dance floor, I believed life had finally reached its gentler season. After years of loss, uncertainty, and quiet nights alone, I let myself believe that peace had found us again. I did not know then that peace can be borrowed, and borrowed peace always comes due. It happened on a Tuesday, not a dramatic day with storms rolling in or sirens wailing through the neighborhood. Just a plain, ordinary Tuesday, the kind where the world feels so steady you forget it can shift without warning. I was out behind the house trimming the basil Camille planted during our last spring together. The air smelled clean, almost sweet, and somewhere down the street a radio played an old Marvin Gaye song. I remember thinking how peaceful the morning felt, how still the world seemed. Then my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Atlanta area code. I wiped my hands on my jeans, thinking it might be David calling from work on a break. I answered with a smile in my voice. But the moment the caller spoke, that smile slipped away. "Mr. Brooks, this is Marcus Hale." I searched my memory, trying to place the name. He did not give me time. "I was the videographer at David's wedding," he continued. His voice was tight, like he was holding something back. "Sir, I really need you to hear me out. People who start sentences like that rarely bring good news." I stepped away from the garden, my heart beginning to tap against my ribs. "Is David all right?" A long pause traveled across the line before Marcus finally said, "Yes, your son is fine, but there's something I need to show you. Something you have to see in person." A coldness slid through me. "What kind of something?" His voice dropped to a strained whisper, as if someone might overhear him even through the phone. "Please, don't tell your son about this. Not yet. I can't explain it over the phone. You need to come to my studio in Atlanta as soon as you can." The way he spoke made the hairs on my arms rise. It reminded me of the night the hospital called about Camille, a voice trying to sound calm but drowning under the weight of truth. "Marcus," I said slowly, "is this about the wedding footage?" Another pause. Too heavy, too deliberate. "Yes," he said. "And no, it's more than that. Please, Mr. Brooks, just come." I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to refuse, to protect the fragile peace I had built around myself. But something in his tone, fear, guilt, urgency, cut through my hesitation. "When do you need me there?" I asked. "Today, if you can," he replied. "Tonight at the latest. I'm sorry to ask this of you. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent." The silence after those words felt like a door closing. "I'll come," I told him. When the call ended, I stood there in my backyard, the breeze barely moving, the world suddenly heavier. I could not shake the feeling that whatever he had found would change everything I thought I knew about my son's new life. I walked inside, washed my hands, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked older than I had that morning, maybe even older than my 58 years. A man who had lived through enough loss to recognize when another blow was coming. I packed a small overnight bag, a couple of shirts, shaving kit, my old leather wallet, and the watch Camille gave me for our 20th anniversary. My hands felt unsteady, not from age, but from a quiet dread threading itself through my chest. Before leaving, I stepped onto the porch and looked out at Harbor Glen. The calm street, the rustling trees, the familiar sounds of home, it all felt like a place I might return to as someone different than the man walking away from it. The drive to Atlanta took hours. The highway stretched long and empty, lit only by the fading light of a sun that seemed to sink faster than usual. I kept replaying Marcus's voice in my head, the breath he took before asking me not to tell David, the tremble he tried to hide. I arrived in the city well past nightfall, exhausted but wide awake. I sat in the car outside his studio for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Whatever waited inside, I knew it would crack the quiet life I had been holding on to, and there was no turning back now. Marcus's studio sat between a shuttered bakery and a dimly lit tattoo shop, the kind of place most people walk past without noticing. The sign above his door flickered, humming each time the bulb tried its best to stay alive. I hesitated before knocking, wondering why my chest felt so tight, why breathing suddenly seemed like work. When the door opened, Marcus stood there, looking as if he had not slept in days. His hair was messy, his hoodie wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him appear older than he was. "Mr. Brooks," he said quietly, "come in, please." The inside of the studio felt cluttered. Tripods leaned in corners like tired soldiers. A scattering of lenses and cables covered the long metal table against the wall. Soft boxes cast pale shadows across the room. Everything seemed to exist in a kind of anxious stillness, the air heavy with unasked questions. He did not offer coffee or small talk. Instead, he walked straight to a workstation in the corner and tapped a key to bring the monitor to life. The screen glowed, revealing a paused frame from David's wedding. Seeing that familiar celebration felt like someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed. Marcus motioned for me to sit. I'm just going to show you, and then we'll talk. He pressed play. The footage began with the soft swaying of guests during the first dance. David and Alyssa moved together beneath strings of warm lights, looking every bit like newlyweds wrapped in their own world. My throat tightened, watching my son smile, like nothing bad could ever touch him. But then Marcus slowed the footage and pointed to the right side of the frame. Look here. A man stood near the edge of the dance floor. Sharp suit, precise haircut, watch that glinted under the lights. His posture was too stiff, too controlled, like someone watching rather than celebrating. I leaned closer. That's not one of our relatives, I murmured. Marcus shook his head. He was introduced to the guests as Alyssa's cousin, Elijah Ross. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Marcus said it made my stomach clench. He clicked forward. Another clip appeared, this time from the toasts. While guests laughed at a joke David's best man told, Alyssa slipped quietly through a side doorway, glancing over her shoulder as if checking for witnesses. A minute later, the same man followed her. Watch, Marcus whispered. He isolated a different camera angle. The view came from a wide shot near the catering station. Alyssa and Elijah stood partially hidden behind a service cart. Their heads leaned close, shoulders tense, hands moving quickly as if exchanging something. Marcus zoomed in until the image grain almost overtook the screen. There, with unmistakable clarity, Alyssa slid a small ivory envelope into Elijah's hand. He tucked it inside his jacket and placed his palm at the small of her back. Not lightly, not casually, the kind of touch reserved for someone who belongs to you. My pulse thudded hard beneath my ribs. Marcus clicked to the next clip. Alyssa returned to the reception 10 minutes later. Her hair slightly disturbed, makeup retouched too quickly. Expression tightened before she forced a smile. Sir, Marcus said, voice cracking. There's more. He handed me a small memory card in a plastic sleeve. She left this in the bridal dressing room. I didn't mean to snoop. I only checked it because I thought it belonged to one of the photographers I hired, but it wasn't theirs. He inserted the card into his computer. A folder appeared, labeled innocently with initials. When he opened it, rows of encrypted files filled the screen. Marcus clicked one. The window displayed partial spreadsheets, lists of names, ages, income levels, and retirement amounts. Next to each name sat a status marker: transferred, pending, or incomplete. My aunt, Marcus said softly, lost her entire retirement last year. She thought she made a smart investment through someone referred by a friend. That someone was Alyssa, and the man she kept disappearing with, Elijah. The room felt colder. I stared at the names, the figures, the quiet cruelty behind each transaction. Marcus swallowed hard. Sir, I think your son is being used, and I think you were their next target. The words landed like a hammer. I gripped the edges of my chair, grounding myself as if the floor might tilt. Outside, cars passed on the street, their headlights sliding across the wall. Life continued moving, unaware that mine had just cracked open. I did not shout. I did not cry. But something inside me, something steady and familiar, began to shift. A man knows when a storm is coming, and I felt it then, not outside, but inside my own chest. The world I thought David lived in was not the world he had actually married into, and this was only the beginning. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound came from the whir of a fan struggling in the corner of the studio, pushing warm air in slow, uneven breaths. I kept staring at the names on the screen, dozens of them, maybe more. Ordinary people. People who had worked their whole lives, trusting the wrong smile, the wrong pitch, the wrong promise. What exactly is this? I finally asked. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Marcus rubbed his forehead like he was trying to erase a memory. I showed these files to a friend of mine, he said. He works as a digital forensics specialist, used to be with a federal task force. I asked him to decrypt the parts I couldn't. When he ran a tracer on the file paths, he recognized the structure. What structure? Marcus clicked into another window. A piece of code filled the screen, rows of symbols and commands I could not pretend to understand. This is identical to a pattern used in a case still under investigation. 3 seniors in Georgia had their entire estates moved into shell accounts, then disappeared into overseas portfolios. They lost everything, every last cent. My breath hitched. You're telling me Alyssa and that man are connected to something like that? He nodded. The program used to hide the transactions is the same. Same encryption style, same exit nodes, same routing tricks. They didn't change anything except the file names. I leaned back, letting the truth settle in slow, heavy layers. It felt like watching a puzzle assemble itself, each piece revealing something darker beneath the surface. She asked me about my pension, I said quietly, surprising myself with the confession. Marcus looked up. When? 2 weeks after the wedding. She brought it up lightly, like it was casual conversation. Asked if I had considered investment diversification. Said she knew good people who managed funds for older clients. I exhaled hard. I thought she was trying to take care of me. I thought she was being kind. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. That's how they do it. They target older men they perceive as stable, generous, or lonely. They build trust slowly, make you feel seen, make you feel valued. Trust, seen, valued. Words that tasted different now. I pressed my palms against my thighs to ground myself. And David? Was he part of her plan too? Marcus hesitated. I don't know. But from what my friend uncovered, it looks like they pick spouses who give them legitimacy. A respectable marriage helps them approach relatives without raising suspicion. The room felt smaller, the walls creeping inward. She married my son, I whispered. Not out of love, but because of what she thought she could get from me. My chest tightened in a way I had not felt since the day I signed Camille's hospice papers. A deep, raw ache that felt almost ancient. Marcus spoke softly. Mr. Brooks, people like Alyssa and Elijah don't think the way you do. To them, relationships are ladders, and your son was a rung. The words sliced through me. I straightened slowly, forcing steadiness into my voice. You said she left this memory card in her dressing room? Marcus nodded. Probably an accident. They're careful, but not perfect. My friend found something else, too. He opened another decrypted document. Bank account numbers, transfer routes, a pattern of staged losses designed to push victims into rescue investments. A signature at the bottom of one contract. A. Grant. Sir, Marcus said carefully, these are not one-off mistakes. This is a coordinated operation. A deeper shadow fell across my thoughts. The kind that warns a man this is no longer about disappointment or betrayal. This was danger. Real, systemic, calculated danger. I leaned forward, hands clasped together, feeling the weight of every truth hitting me at once. I won't let them anywhere near my son again, I said quietly. And in that moment, resolve replaced every trace of shock. Because once a father knows the truth, he cannot unknow it. And once he sees the threat, he cannot turn away. The drive back to Harbor Glen felt longer than the road that brought me to Atlanta. I kept the radio off, letting the sound of the tires humming against the highway fill the silence. Sometimes silence is a comfort. Other times, it is a mirror. And that night, it showed me every fear I had tried to ignore. By the time I reached my street, the moon was sitting low over the water, casting a pale reflection across the inlet. The neighborhood looked peaceful, unchanged, as if nothing in the world had shifted. But I had, and there was no unshifting that. I let myself into the house, not bothering to turn on the lights. Darkness matched the state of my mind more honestly than any lamp could. I sat at the kitchen table where Camille used to place her teacup each morning, her fingers tapping the rim while she hummed something soft and familiar. I put both hands on the worn wood and closed my eyes, letting the weight of truth settle fully into me. I thought about David, about his smile at the wedding, about how he said Alyssa made him feel seen. My son has always loved deeply, with a heart too open for a world that often punishes softness. When he was a boy and scraped his knee, he cried with a hurt that seemed bigger than the wound. When Camille died, he held my hand and whispered, "Dad, we'll be okay," even though both of us were breaking. He is good, too good for the woman he married. A slow ache spread through my chest. Grief is not always loud or sharp. Sometimes it is a quiet crushing, a heaviness that sits behind the ribs and waits. That night, it waited with me. I did not fight it. I did not try to swallow it. I let it have those few hours because I knew what came next would require a steadier version of myself. My phone buzzed around 10. A message from David. "Love you, Dad. Hope you got home safe." I stared at the screen for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. No words felt right, not with the truth sitting so close to my heart. Finally, I wrote the only thing I knew would not crack under the weight of what I was carrying. "Love you too, son." I set the phone down and leaned back, exhaling slowly. Protecting him meant silence for now. Silence, not because I feared the truth, but because timing shapes everything. If I told him too soon, the pain would swallow him whole. If I waited until the ground was ready, the truth might guide him instead of shattering him. The night stretched on. I walked onto the porch, feeling the wood groan beneath my feet. The air smelled of salt and old pine. I lowered myself into my rocking chair and looked at the sky. Camille used to say the stars were God's breadcrumbs, little reminders that light still exists even when darkness is bigger. I touched the watch she gave me, tracing its cold metal. "I'm trying," I whispered. "I don't know how this will end, but I'm trying." By the time dawn crept across the water, something in me had shifted. My grief had done its job. It had softened me, just enough to stay human, but not enough to break me. Purpose replaced the ache, and purpose, once lit, burns steady. When the sun rose, I stood up, took a long breath, and said aloud to the empty house, "It's time." Because a father can cry for one night, but a father prepares for battle the next. By the next morning, the decision felt carved into me like grain in old wood. I brewed coffee I barely tasted and sat at the kitchen table waiting for the hour to pass. At 9 sharp, Marcus called. His voice was steadier now, but still carried that brittle edge. Grief gives a man who has seen too much, too quickly. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "there's someone I need you to talk to. Someone who understands what we're dealing with." I didn't hesitate. "Tell me where to go." He gave me an address on the outskirts of Atlanta, a federal annex with no markings on the outside. It looked like a storage facility, the kind of place designed to be overlooked. I drove there in a silence that felt sharper than the night before. When I arrived, the security guard instructed me to wait in a small lobby until someone came to get me. After a few minutes, a woman stepped through the inner door, tall, composed, dressed in a navy suit with a badge clipped to her belt. Her eyes were alert, the kind that had seen people lie enough times to recognize the truth before it arrived. "Mr. Brooks," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Special Agent Naomi Carter, Federal Department of Financial Integrity." Her handshake was firm, the kind that communicated both urgency and respect. "Marcus told me why you're here," she continued as she led me down a quiet hallway. "And I'm grateful. We've been following a criminal operation for almost 2 years. We call it Cobalt Nest." The name alone felt cold. Inside a small briefing room, she set a file in front of me. On the top page was a diagram. Shell companies, offshore accounts, forged contracts, and a cluster of names circled in red. In the center was the name we both feared, Alyssa Grant. Agent Carter spoke with a steady, measured tone. "This is not a low-level scam. It's a coordinated structure designed to exploit older individuals, particularly those recently widowed or approaching retirement. They manipulate relationships, gather financial details, and then shift assets before anyone notices." She paused, studying me. "Alyssa is one of their key access points." I forced myself to keep breathing evenly. And Elijah Ross? Senior operative, she said. He manages the offshore transfers. He's responsible for at least 3 major losses we've traced. We haven't been able to pin down the evidence needed for a full takedown. She tapped the folder lightly. Until now. I looked at her, unsure. Me? Yes, she said. They've targeted you. You fit their ideal profile. You're the piece we've been missing. It wasn't fear that ran through me then. It was something steadier, something that felt like a grip tightening around a purpose I hadn't asked for but couldn't walk away from. What do you need me to do? I asked. Agent Carter slid a small box toward me. Inside was a wristwatch identical to the one Camille gave me, except heavier. We replaced the interior with a micro-audio transmitter, she said. If Alyssa approaches you about investments, agreements, or asset transfers, we need you to act interested. Ask questions. Let her talk. Let her think you trust her. I held the watch, feeling the weight of the task settle into my palm. She will reveal more when she believes she's winning, Carter continued. People like her always do. I nodded slowly. I'll do it. But David, my son, he can't know. Not yet. We agree, she said. The truth will reach him. But only when the ground is safe enough for him to stand on. I closed the box gently, feeling something inside me align with certainty. For the first time since the nightmare began, I wasn't walking into the storm alone. 3 days passed before Alyssa called me. I was on the porch, watering Camille's herbs, pretending my world was still simple. When her name flashed on my phone, something inside me tightened like a knot pulled too hard. Leonard? She said, her voice syrupy smooth. David told me you might be coming to Atlanta soon. I was hoping we could talk about something important, something that could really help your financial security. There it was. The invitation into the trap she didn't know was hers. I kept my tone calm, even friendly. I was thinking about that myself, I said. Thought maybe you could give me some guidance. She sounded relieved. Absolutely. Why don't you let me take you to my office? We'll go through everything step by step. Step by step. The phrase tasted darker now. When I arrived in Atlanta the next morning, David hugged me with the easy sincerity that has always lived in him. Alyssa stood beside him, smiling with a glow too polished, too precise, like someone rehearsing emotions rather than feeling them. She touched my arm lightly. I'm so glad you came. Let's go downtown before traffic gets worse. David offered to join us, but Alyssa gently insisted he stay home and rest after a long work week. That insistence felt too eager, but I smiled as if everything made perfect sense. The building she worked in was a tall glass tower, too reflective, too perfect. Inside, the elevator hummed quietly as we rose. She adjusted her hair, smoothed her blazer, and flashed a smile at her reflection, like she was preparing for a performance. We entered a small conference room on the 23rd floor. The city stretched out below us, glittering like a promise. On the table were neatly stacked folders, glossy pamphlets, pens arranged at sharp angles, nothing out of place. Alyssa closed the door behind us and sat across from me, folding her hands with deliberate grace. So, she began, I've been looking at your profile, and I think you're in a perfect position to grow your savings dramatically. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve to rest. She said it gently, the way a predator speaks just before showing its teeth. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Alyssa, but I'm not sure I understand how everything works. Could you explain it to me again? Real simple. Her eyes gleamed that flicker of superiority she tried to hide. Of course. It's easy. We transfer your pension into a transitional account, just temporarily. From there, we place it into a private rotation fund. New investors keep the cycle fluid. Within 90 days, you'll see returns of 30% or more. I frowned slightly. New investors? That means their money covers the returns? She didn't even hesitate. Only initially. It balances out. It's a growth pattern. A phrase no legitimate advisor would ever use. I leaned back. And David? Did you help him with something similar? That question unsettled her. Her smile tightened, eyes flicking to the door as if checking for exits. Her voice thinned. David? No, of course not. His accounts are fine. Why would you ask that? I shrugged lightly. Curiosity, I guess. She exhaled through her nose, collecting herself. Then she leaned forward, setting a single sheet in front of me. This is the authorization form. If you sign here, we can get things started today. I looked down at the paper, though my focus remained on her voice, her posture, every move she made. Inside my watch, the transmitter recorded it all, but I needed her to say more. I still don't get it, I murmured. What exactly happens to my money after it goes overseas? Her impatience cracked through her polished exterior. Leonard, please. This is simple. The money is circulated through a protected investor pool. The returns come back to you. Everything stays quiet and stable. People your age don't need volatility. People your age? The words hit me like an insult disguised as guidance. I let a beat pass. Then another. Could you explain the rotation again? I asked softly. This time, she sighed, letting the mask slip. It's just redistributed through new funds coming in. It's not complicated. There it was. The confession. The unguarded truth. Her phone buzzed, startling her. She glanced at the screen quickly, almost fearfully. We need to finish this, she whispered. Sooner is better. I folded my hands calmly. I think I understand more than you believe, I said. Her eyes narrowed, but she still didn't grasp that the trap she'd set was already closing around her one word at a time. Before Alyssa could react to my last words, the conference room door swung open hard enough to rattle the glass wall. A tall figure stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a force that felt deliberate. Elijah Ross. Sharply dressed again, but this time sweat darkened the collar of his shirt, and his eyes carried something unsettled, something frantic. Alyssa, he hissed, ignoring my presence completely. We have a problem. She stiffened. Elijah, what are you doing here? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing with quick, impatient steps. The Hong Kong partner is pulling out. They're threatening to freeze every offshore channel until we secure fresh liquid assets. His voice cracked. We don't have time. Alyssa's face drained of color. That wasn't supposed to happen until next quarter. We need more time. We don't have more time. Elijah slammed a folder onto the table, pages spilling out. We need his signature. The room's air seemed to compress around us. His signature. Mine. Only then did Elijah finally acknowledge I existed. His gaze swept over me, cold and calculating, nothing like the polite cousin he pretended to be at the wedding. So, this is the father-in-law, he muttered. Good. Let's make this fast. Alyssa shot him a sharp look, but Elijah walked right up to me, leaning close enough for me to smell the bitter edge of his cologne. You're going to sign the transfer authorization, he said. Today. I met his stare calmly. And why would I do that? His jaw flexed. Because if you don't, everything we've built collapses. Do you understand the size of this operation? People are watching. People who don't tolerate failure. Alyssa flinched, confirming more than she meant to. He pointed at the paperwork as if directing a child. Sign it, and this stays clean. Everyone walks away. Refuse. He shook his head slowly. And things get messy. Alyssa swallowed hard. Elijah, stop. This isn't helping. You started this, he snapped. You married into the wrong family. You said his father had assets. Waterfront property. Investments. You told me he would be an easy target. Alyssa froze, eyes widening in horror. She never meant for that truth to be spoken aloud. My pulse thudded once slow, heavy, final. Waterfront property. My wife's inheritance. The last thing Camille left behind. So, that was the reason for the whirlwind romance. The doting smiles. The gentle questions. The feigned concern. Alyssa reached toward Elijah. I didn't tell you to say that. You didn't have to, he snapped. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle. So, you married my son to get to me. Alyssa shook her head rapidly, tears gathering. No, Leonard, It wasn't like that. I, I grew to care about him. I didn't want. Save it, Elijah snarled. We don't have time for guilt. He shoved the papers in front of me. Sign, now. I glanced at the watch on my wrist. The transmitter blinked once. Perfect timing. I sighed softly. You know, I've always believed a man should think carefully before giving anyone his signature. Elijah's eyes narrowed. Old man, if you don't. He didn't finish. The door slammed open again, this time not with panic, but with purpose. Special Agent Naomi Carter stepped inside, badge raised, voice firm. Elijah Ross. Alyssa Grant. Federal warrant for your arrest on charges of financial fraud, conspiracy, and elder exploitation. Do not move. Behind her, federal agents flooded the room, weapons drawn, voices layered with authoritative force. Elijah bolted toward the emergency exit. 2 agents lunged after him as he burst into the stairwell. Shouts echoed, footsteps pounding against metal steps in a frantic spiral downward. I heard a yell, a scuffle, and the thud of bodies hitting concrete. Moments later, the agents returned, Elijah handcuffed, furious, breathless. Alyssa didn't run. She just stood there trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I never meant to hurt David, she whispered as agents restrained her. I swear I didn't. I looked at her, not with hatred, not with triumph, but with a quiet resolve carved by grief and love. You hurt him the moment you lied, I said softly. Agent Carter placed a hand on my shoulder. We got everything. Your recording was clear. As Alyssa and Elijah were led away, the tension in the room slowly loosened. The storm had broken, not with thunder, but with truth. I took a breath, deep and steady. It was done. But the aftermath had only begun. Telling David the truth was harder than facing Elijah's threats or watching Alyssa in handcuffs. I drove back to his apartment that same afternoon, rehearsing a dozen versions of the conversation, none of them gentle enough. When he opened the door, smiling with the ease of a man who believed life was still intact, something inside me cracked a little. Dad, you're back sooner than I expected, he said, stepping aside for me to enter. Everything okay? No. But I nodded anyway, because parents do that sometimes. We soften the truth until we can find the right place to set it down. We sat on his couch, sunlight slipping in through the blinds in pale stripes. I took a breath, slow and steady, the same way I used to, before making announcements over the bus intercom. David, I said gently, I need you to listen without interrupting. And I need you to remember that nothing I'm about to tell you is your fault. He blinked, already sensing the shift in the air. Dad, you're scaring me. I told him everything. Not the federal details, not the classified methods, but the truth that mattered. Alyssa's lies, Elijah's involvement, the offshore schemes, the recording, the arrest. With each word, David's face dimmed a little more. When I finished, he sat very still, staring at the carpet like it was suddenly unfamiliar. So she didn't love me, he whispered eventually. She loved what she thought she could take. I wanted to deny it, soften it, offer some thread of comfort. But lies had no place left between us. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands covering his face. I rested a hand on his back, feeling the subtle tremor in his shoulders. Not the kind caused by fear, but heartbreak. I'm sorry, son, I said quietly. He shook his head. You protected me, even when I didn't know I needed protecting. We stayed like that for a long time, 2 men sitting in silence, letting the truth settle in the space between us. Eventually, David wiped his eyes and said, Can I come home with you for a while? Of course, I told him, for as long as you need. That weekend, we returned to Harbor Glen. The house felt fuller with him there, like the walls exhaled after holding their breath. We spent hours repairing the old deck out back, replacing warped boards, sanding rough edges, working side by side the way we used to when he was a teenager helping with weekend projects. No dramatics, no heavy conversations, just the comfort of hands busy and hearts slowly healing. On Sunday evening, he looked out at the water and said, "Dad, thank you for not letting this destroy me." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not meant to be destroyed, son. You're meant to rise." And there, beneath the soft glow of a Harbor Glen sunset, we began the long but steady process of building a life that could stand again. In the weeks that followed, the world slowly settled back into place, though not exactly as it had been. Some losses don't leave scars you can point to. They settle deeper, shaping the quiet moments when you sit with yourself and realize you are no longer the man you were before the storm. I found myself on the porch most evenings, watching the water shimmer under fading light, letting the air fill with the kind of stillness that asks nothing of you except honesty. David began rebuilding his life one day at a time. Some mornings, he walked the pier with me, silent but present. Other days, he worked on the deck alone, letting the rhythm of the hammer speak for him. Healing doesn't move in straight lines. It circles, slips, steadies, then surprises you with progress you didn't know you'd made. Watching him rise again reminded me that strength is rarely loud. More often, it whispers through small steps taken in the right direction. As for Alyssa and Elijah, the law took its course. I didn't waste energy hoping they suffered. Life delivers consequences without requiring my bitterness to feed it. What mattered more was the peace that followed, the kind that settles in a man's chest when he knows he did what was necessary, not what was easy. If there is one lesson this story left me with, it is this: trust is a gift, not a guarantee. Give it freely, but protect it with wisdom. When deception appears, don't let anger guide you. Let clarity speak instead. And when the time comes to act, do so with dignity, because dignity is the only armor that never cracks under pressure. So if you stood with me through every word of this journey, thank you. May your own path be guarded, and may your courage be quiet but unshakable when the moment calls for it.